My name is Evelyn Hart, and I am 63 years old. For most of my adult life, people have described me as practical, careful, or more bluntly, frugal. I never minded the label. To me, living simply was just a way to stay steady in a world that loved to swing between excess and regret. I clipped coupons, packed my own lunches, wore my shoes until the soles confessed defeat, and rarely indulged in the glittery purchases that seemed to define everyone else's happiness. I had spent 40 years working as a school librarian, a quiet job in a quiet building, guiding children through books and stories while building a modest savings account one slow deposit at a time. My mantra had always been the same: live within your means, and one day your means will expand. But to my friends and extended family, this wasn't prudence. It was a flaw. A strange defect. Something to tease me about. That teasing used to be gentle, good-natured, the kind you can brush off. But over the past year, it had taken on a sharpness that felt far less innocent. My younger sister, Valerie, had been especially relentless. She was 56, newly divorced, trying to redefine herself through bright clothes and expensive adventures. She'd show me pictures of luxury apartments she wanted to tour, just for fun, and then laugh when I said I preferred my small townhouse on the edge of the city. "You're going to die sitting on a pile of unspent money," she'd say. "You should live a little." I'd smile politely, the way you do when you're used to a family member's personality quirks. But inside, I'd feel that small sting of judgment. What they never understood was that my frugality was never rooted in fear. It was a strategy. A long game. And one day soon, I suspected they were going to learn that lesson more clearly than they expected. The moment I truly felt the shift, when small jokes turned into something closer to mockery, happened at a Sunday brunch gathering. 15 of us around a long table. Valerie was showing off photos of a new apartment complex downtown, a building wrapped in glass and gold accents, with a rooftop garden and a concierge who greeted residents by name. "It's my dream place," she said. "If I can just find a roommate to split it with." Then she winked at me. Obviously not Evelyn. She's probably still washing plastic bags to save 50 cents. The table laughed. Some people tried to stifle it, but they laughed all the same. I simply sipped my tea, pretending it didn't bother me, though it did. More than I wanted to admit. What no one at that table knew, not Valerie, not the cousins, not the friends, was that for the past 8 months, I had quietly been preparing for a change of my own. A permanent one. And it involved a building they knew all too well. But at the time, all I did was allow the moment to pass, storing their words with the rest of the things people assume I will forget. I never forget. Not cruelty. Not kindness either. That brunch was the spark. The beginning of a story they never saw coming. A story about money, pride, and the very human desire to be understood. I didn't know it yet, but the apartment they all fantasized about, the one they shared photos of like it was a celebrity, was about to become central to my life. Not because I envied them, but because I had quietly, calmly, methodically positioned myself to own something they believed was far out of my reach. And when the truth emerged, it would shake more than a few egos. For now, though, the seeds were only just beginning to grow beneath the soil. And I could already feel a storm coming. I wish I could say the mockery ended at that brunch, but life rarely grants us such tidy conclusions. If anything, the teasing only intensified over the following weeks. It became a running joke in our family group chat, little pictures of coupons, videos about extreme cheapskates, memes about people reusing tea bags. They usually came from Valerie, but others chimed in too. Now, I've lived long enough to know that sometimes people mask their insecurities by poking at the habits of others. But even so, there's a point where humor turns into disrespect. And that line was crossed the afternoon I discovered something far more unsettling than a rude message. It happened during one of Valerie's visits. She'd stopped by unannounced, as she sometimes did when she wanted to avoid sitting alone in her condo. She walked through my modest home with her usual commentary. "You still have this old sofa? Evelyn, you could at least upgrade. Or are you saving up for a yacht?" I laughed it off, as I always had. We sat down for tea, and while I stepped into the kitchen to get a tray, I heard the quick rustle of paper. I didn't think much of it, until I returned. Valerie was holding one of my notebooks. Not a journal, but a financial notebook. She wasn't reading it out of innocent curiosity. She was photographing it. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. She startled, then forced a laugh. "Relax. It's just funny how organized you are about saving money." I reached out my hand. She returned the notebook, but the damage was done. After she left, I checked my phone. Sure enough, she had posted screenshots in the family chat, captioned, "Evelyn's Savings War Room. No wonder she won't enjoy life." The replies rolled in. Laughing emojis. Jokes about tightwads. One cousin even wrote, "Maybe she'll leave it all to her cat instead of real people." The betrayal wasn't the mockery. It was the violation of privacy. The casual cruelty of airing someone's personal habits for entertainment. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, my notebook in front of me, and felt a quiet shift inside myself. Not anger exactly, though there was some of that, but a deep certainty. I had spent decades being the responsible one. The stable one. The quiet one. I had been the daughter who paid for our mother's medications when Valerie's impulsive spending habits left her unable to contribute. I had been the aunt who helped a nephew with tuition when the rest of the family shrugged. I had been the friend who remembered birthdays, the neighbor who swept my side of the sidewalk and theirs when snow fell. Yet somehow, I had become the punchline. What Valerie and the others didn't realize was that my frugality had grown into something very different over the years. I wasn't clipping coupons to save pennies anymore. I was quietly, deliberately accumulating wealth. The kind most people never imagined someone like me could have. The kind that buys freedom, security, and yes, even luxury if one wishes it. But the truth is, I had never wanted luxury for its own sake. I wanted choice, dignity, independence. And now, after Valerie's little stunt, I wanted something else too. I wanted to remind them, kindly, ethically, but unmistakably, that the quietest person in the room often has the most to say. The betrayal gave me clarity. And clarity gave me momentum. Because the very next morning, I received a phone call that marked the beginning of their rude awakening. A representative from the new luxury apartment building downtown, the same one my family idolized, was calling to confirm our upcoming appointment. The appointment Valerie didn't know I had. The apartment she called her dream. And the contract I was already pre-approved to sign. When people think of modest women like me, they usually assume we came from modest beginnings. In my case, that wasn't entirely true. My parents weren't wealthy, but they weren't poor either. We had a comfortable life until my father passed when I was 19 and my mother spiraled into grief that seemed to hollow her out from the inside. Valerie was only 12 then. I stepped into the role of caretaker, first for her, then for our mother, then later for my own small household. I worked part-time through college, saved everything I could, and learned the power of stretching a dollar so reliably that it became second nature. Valerie, on the other hand, ran in the opposite direction. She chased the thrill of newness. New clothes, new trends, new men, new homes. Never understanding that a life built on new can collapse as easily as a house of cards. I think part of why she mocked me so aggressively was because my lifestyle contradicted hers. Where I was steady, she was scattered. Where I was grounded, she was restless. And where I had savings, she had debt. But here's the irony. All those years of careful living didn't feel like sacrifice. I never envied her impulsive purchases or her glamorous weekends. I found joy in the quiet, simple comforts, a cup of tea, a good book, a garden that never judged me for my thrift. Still, I wasn't naive. I knew how the world worked. People judge what they don't understand. And they especially judge what they feel insecure about. Over the years, something else happened too. Something Valerie and the others never bothered to ask about. I invested. Carefully, consistently, and early. Index funds in my 30s. A rental property in my 40s. A small inheritance from an aunt in my 50s, which I placed into long-term bonds. By the time I retired from the library, quietly, without ceremony, my frugality had blossomed into a financial foundation most people only dream of. I didn't flaunt it. I didn't feel the need to. But I also didn't hide from reality. I could afford things most people assumed were far beyond my reach. That included the apartment building downtown. It had caught my attention months earlier, not because of its luxury, but because of its practical benefits. Proximity to hospitals, accessibility features, well-lit hallways, and a staff trained to assist aging residents. I wasn't buying glamour. I was buying long-term comfort, security, and a bit of beauty, because age has taught me that aesthetic joy is not frivolous, it's nourishing. When I first toured the building alone, before Valerie ever discovered it existed, I quietly chose a unit on the 12th floor. The one with the perfect afternoon light, the view of the river, and the small balcony I could fill with potted herbs. I had been approved immediately. I had just been waiting for one last document to finalize. And that document was ready now. Looking back, I wonder if I would have told Valerie and the others about the apartment at all if they hadn't mocked me so viciously. But cruelty has a way of revealing truth. And their truth was simple. They saw my kindness as weakness, my quiet as emptiness, my frugality as poverty. They assumed they understood my life because they never bothered to look deeper. So I decided it was time to show them, not out of spite, but out of self-respect, that I was not the character they had invented in their heads. I wanted them to realize that underestimating someone doesn't make you superior. It makes you blind. And so, when the next brunch invitation arrived, another gathering full of judgments disguised as jokes, I accepted it. Because if they were going to laugh about apartments and money they didn't have, they might as well do so in the presence of someone who had already signed the contract they could only dream about. The next morning, I arrived at the luxury apartment building to complete the final inspection before signing. The lobby smelled faintly of jasmine and cedar. Soft instrumental music floated in the air. A concierge smiled warmly as I approached the front desk. "Good morning, Ms. Hart," he said, greeting me like an old friend. "The 12th floor unit is ready for your walkthrough." Every time he used my name, I felt a quiet thrill, not out of vanity, but out of affirmation. Here, I wasn't the punchline of a family joke. I wasn't the frugal one. I was simply a woman making a dignified choice about her future. As we stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed. It was the family group chat again. Valerie had sent more photos of her dream apartment, the same building I was standing in. "Maybe if I win the lottery," she joked. "Or if Evelyn finally loosens that tight wallet," another cousin added. I silenced the phone. During the walkthrough, I examined everything. The finishes, the storage spaces, the lighting, the water pressure, the soundproofing. I asked questions. The representative answered them all patiently. But I had an investigative agenda of my own, not about the apartment, but about the growing shift in my family's behavior. Their recent cruelty wasn't spontaneous. It had a pattern. Why had Valerie suddenly become so invested in mocking my finances? Why had other relatives joined in so eagerly? Why was there suddenly talk about inheritances and unused money? Something felt off. So I began quietly observing, listening. At brunches, I noticed how Valerie whispered with cousins whenever my thriftiness came up. I noticed how they exchanged glances whenever I ordered something inexpensive. I noticed how they changed the subject whenever I asked about their own financial decisions. And I noticed something else too. Every time Valerie spoke about the dream apartment, she emphasized how she needed a roommate. It wasn't a playful comment. It was a wish disguised as a joke. She couldn't afford it alone. She was fishing for someone, anyone, to help sustain a lifestyle she couldn't carry. But she didn't consider me for a moment, not because I couldn't afford it, but because she believed I couldn't. She had built an entire narrative about my life that wasn't rooted in truth, but in her own need to feel superior. The investigation wasn't about gathering dirt, but understanding motives. Why was I their favorite target lately? What had triggered this heightened mockery? And then, during one particular brunch conversation, the answer surfaced. A cousin joked, if Valerie moves into that apartment, she's going to need family visiting hours just to stay sane. Valerie laughed. Honestly, it's nice to imagine living somewhere too classy for Evelyn to show up with her grocery store tote bags. The table roared with laughter. That was it. The motive. The contempt. The unspoken hope that I would always remain below them in status. Their jokes were never really about money. They were about hierarchy. But hierarchy built on illusion has a way of collapsing under truth. And the truth was now officially mine to reveal. Because at the end of that walkthrough, the representative extended a folder toward me. Congratulations, Ms. Hart, he said. Your unit is ready. All we need is your signature. I signed. Calmly. Gracefully. With the same steadiness that had guided me through a lifetime of careful choices. The contract was mine. The apartment was mine. And the truth, soon, would be mine to reveal. But not yet. A perfect reveal requires patience, timing, precision. And I had waited 63 years to master those skills. The next brunch was held at my cousin Daniel's penthouse. Valerie arrived late, dressed in a bright floral blouse and oversized sunglasses, carrying a designer purse that still had the price tag tucked discreetly inside. I watched her float around the room, showing photos of the dream apartment to anyone who would look. I'm manifesting it, she said. One day I'll be living there, sipping morning lattes on the balcony. I sipped my water and waited. Eventually, the conversation shifted to me, as it often did. Someone asked why I still drove that old sedan. Someone else joked that I probably brought my own tea bags to restaurants. Valerie added a snide comment about my notebook of rationing strategies. Laughter again. Predictable. I could have spoken up then. I could have shut it all down with one sentence. But revealing the truth wasn't about humiliating them. It was about reclaiming my dignity. So instead, I simply observed a little longer. Then the moment presented itself. Daniel asked Valerie, "So, what happened with that apartment? You still planning to apply?" She sighed dramatically. "Honestly, I can't yet. They raised the deposit. And without a roommate, I'd be stretching myself too thin." A few sympathetic nods circled the room. Someone joked about how Evelyn could save her entire life and still not afford that place. I set my glass down gently. "Well, actually," I began, my voice soft but steady, "I had my final walkthrough 2 days ago." The room paused. Valerie blinked. "Walkthrough? Of what?" "The apartment building you're talking about," I replied. "The 12th floor. The unit with the river view." You could have heard a fork drop. I continued, "I signed the contract on Thursday morning." Silence. Stunned. Thick silence. Finally Valerie laughed, assuming it was a joke. "Oh, come on. Evelyn, you buying a luxury apartment? You're thrifty, not insane." I smiled. "I bought it because I'm thrifty, not despite it." Then I reached into my purse and placed the folder on the table. The contract. The deed application. The confirmation letter with my name written clearly across the top. "I've been planning this for a while," I said. "The lifestyle suits my needs as I get older. Safety. Accessibility. Good lighting. And I must say, the balcony will be lovely for reading." Everyone leaned in. No one spoke. Valerie's face drained of color. "You bought it? That exact building?" "Yes. With your savings." "With my investments mostly," I said calmly. "I've been preparing for retirement for a long time." The room remained frozen, processing a truth that contradicted every assumption they'd made about me. In that silence, something shifted, not just in me but in them. They had underestimated me so profoundly that the revelation felt impossible to them. It was almost amusing how shocked they were. But I stayed composed. No gloating. No bitterness. Just truth. Then Valerie whispered, almost to herself, "But that was supposed to be my place." I looked at her, not unkindly. "It still can be someday, if you plan carefully. You're not too old to start." She didn't respond. For the first time in years, the room no longer saw me as the frugal aunt with outdated habits. They saw me as a woman who had quietly built the life she wanted, without approval, without applause, without debt. The truth had unfolded, and there was no turning back from it. Valerie waited until after brunch to confront me privately. She cornered me in Daniel's guest room, her voice much smaller than usual. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. Not angry, hurt. Truly hurt. I sat down on the edge of the bed. "Because every time I tried to talk about my financial plans, you mocked them." She crossed her arms. "I mocked your frugality, not you buying luxury real estate." I met her eyes. "You mocked the habits that allowed me to buy it." She fell silent. I continued calmly and deliberately. "Valerie, you didn't just tease me. You photographed my private notes. You posted them in the group chat. You turned my lifestyle into entertainment." "That was a joke," she murmured. "That was a violation," I corrected gently. "And it showed me that you didn't see me as an equal. You saw me as someone you could look down on." She sank into a chair, her shoulders dropping. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said. "But impact matters more than intent." For once, she didn't argue. She didn't defend herself with sarcasm or excuses. She just sat there, quiet, processing her own behavior. After a long pause, she finally asked, "Why that apartment? Why the one I wanted?" I shook my head. "I didn't buy it to spite you. I toured it months before you ever mentioned it. I chose it for practical reasons. The joke here is that you assumed I couldn't possibly want something you wanted." She winced. "Valerie," I said gently, "you are my sister. I love you. But the way you treat me sometimes, it's unkind. And unnecessary." Her lip trembled slightly. "I guess I never thought about it like that." "I know you didn't," I said. "That's why I'm telling you now. Not to shame you. To help us move forward." She looked up. "Are you angry with me?" "Yes," I said honestly. "But I'm also hopeful. Because this is the first time you're really listening." Something softened in her expression. Something sincere. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I really am." I nodded. "Thank you. That matters." The confrontation wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth. And truth delivered calmly carries more weight than shouting ever could. When we returned to the living room, the energy in the room had shifted. People looked at me differently. Not with pity or curiosity, but with respect. For years, I had been the wallpaper of these gatherings. Present, pleasant, but overlooked. Now, I stood firmly in my own identity. A woman who had earned her place in that apartment through decades of intention. And I hadn't raised my voice once. News spreads quickly in families, especially news that appends long-standing assumptions. Within 2 days, every relative knew about the apartment. Some called to congratulate me, others called to apologize. A few remained silent, but silence often speaks louder than any words could. As for Valerie, she changed. Not overnight, but noticeably. Her jokes shifted into genuine questions. Instead of mocking my budgeting habits, she asked how she could start her own. She even admitted that she'd been overwhelmed by her divorce, her debts, and the fear that she was running out of time to rebuild. I offered to help, not with money, but with guidance, if she truly wanted it. Meanwhile, I began moving into my new place. Unpacking was a slow, peaceful ritual. I carried in boxes of books, old photographs, and the familiar teapot that had seen me through countless quiet mornings. The 12th floor view of the river changed with the light. Soft blue at dawn, shimmering gold at dusk. Neighbors introduced themselves politely. The staff treated me with respect. And for the first time in a long time, I felt not just financially secure, but emotionally affirmed. My family's reaction became an unexpected mirror. I saw clearly who had underestimated me, who had cared, who had reflected on their behavior, and who had simply been uncomfortable with the truth. Consequences don't always look like punishment. Sometimes they look like clarity. Valerie visited my apartment 2 weeks after I moved in. She walked through the rooms silently, touching the edges of counters, peering out the balcony window. "It really is beautiful," she whispered. I nodded. "Yes, it is." She turned to me. "I'm glad it's yours." I believed her. Slowly, the family teasing faded. The jokes stopped. They asked real questions. They began treating me with a level of respect I hadn't experienced in years. Not because I bought a luxury apartment, but because I revealed the truth of who I had always been. And in doing so, I reclaimed the dignity they had carelessly chipped away at. It has been 6 months since I moved into the apartment, the one they all dreamed of but never imagined I could own. Life here is gentle, quiet, and steady, just the way I like it. I read on my balcony in the mornings, grow rosemary and thyme in small clay pots, and enjoy sunsets that paint the river in shades of rose and silver. Sometimes Valerie visits, and we share tea without tension. Sometimes family members ask for advice, not about money, but about patience and planning and the long view of life. I never lecture. I simply share what I've learned. I don't resent them anymore. In truth, their mockery helped me understand my own worth more clearly. It pushed me to speak up, to stand tall, and to reveal parts of myself I had kept hidden for decades. Revenge, I've learned, is not about tearing others down. It is about rising, in truth, in dignity, and in peace. The real victory wasn't the apartment. It was the transformation of relationships, the setting of boundaries, the quiet reminder that assumptions are often wrong. People will always talk. Some will mock what they don't understand. Some will judge what they envy. But the truth always stands steady, waiting patiently for its moment to shine. My frugality built my future. My patience revealed it. And my silence, when finally broken, spoke louder than any joke they ever made. As I sit here in my living room, sunlight warming my hands, I feel a calm sense of completion. To anyone listening, I'll leave you with this. Don't let others define your worth. Don't shrink yourself to fit their assumptions. And don't be afraid to reveal the full truth of who you are, especially when the world has underestimated you. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts. I'd love to hear what part spoke to your heart the most.